Hello, English 2. I wanted to help you out because I know Macbeth is super hard. So, a resource I'm going to post on our Google Classroom is right here. So, if you check it out, it's a timeline for Macbeth. What I have found is the hardest part for students to understand in the beginning, in like the first three acts, is who's who, especially because so many people in this play have names with this that start with the letter M or Mac, right? Like Macbeth, Macduff, and it can be very confusing. So I'm going to walk you through a few things here real fast to help support your viewing of the play as well as your reading. So this is just a review of like what has happened so far in the Scottish play. And I'm saying the Scottish play because the show is cursed. And apparently my show was cursed this year too. And it's because someone said Macbeth this year. But that's a conversation for another time. So in Act 1, the witches meet and they are hoping to meet with Macbeth. And the big quote from that scene is the line, "Fair is foul and foul is fair." So this idea that appearances are deceiving, just like the witches are deceiving. And Macbeth, when he does eventually meet them, is like, ooh, okay, I'm into these bearded ladies because they told me I was going to be king. And Banquo's like, yo, we shouldn't trust these you-know-whats because they're creepy as you-know-what, which we'll get into in a moment. So in Act 1, we see that Macbeth is quite the noble warrior. So there are two wars that are going on at the start of Act 1 in Scotland. So Scotland has two wars happening. There's an internal war, a civil war, and Macdonald is basically fighting against King Duncan. Well, Macbeth ends up being a great war hero because he kills Macdonald. And there's a line in the play that says, "From the knave to the chops," which means Macbeth literally cut Macdonald in half from his belly button all the way to the top of his head, like his neck, and then he chopped off his head and put it on a spike. Pretty brutal. The second war going on is because the traitor Thane of Cawdor let Norway invade Scotland. So as soon as that happens, Macbeth, who just basically won the war against Macdonald, basically stops the Battle of Norway coming in, which is why King Duncan says what he, meaning Thane of Cawdor, hath lost, noble Macbeth hath won. So he essentially gives his titles to Macbeth for the reward for winning both big battles. So then when the witches in Act 1 meet Macbeth, they're like, hey, listen up. We got something to tell y'all, right? The first big prophecy is that Macbeth will be king. But the second big prophecy is that Banquo, Macbeth's best bud, his sons will be king. Notice how Macbeth has no heirs. And Lady Macbeth and Macbeth, if they don't have descendants that are going to be king, well, what's going to happen to their line? Which is why later in the show, Macbeth becomes super paranoid and shady toward toward Banquo. So when Lady Macbeth receives the news in Act 1, she is worried that Macbeth is too kind to carry out what needs to be done. Meaning, instead of like waiting for fate to just happen and somehow Macbeth become king, she is like, no. We got to take this in our own hands. My husband is noble. He would be a great king, but he's too kind. So I'm going to fill him with wickedness, with evil, with the murdering minister's gall to give her strength so that her husband can essentially carry out the murder. So the plot for the murder is this idea that they're going to murder King Duncan, and they do, which we know, but their plot is to like act like a flower, but really be the snake under the flower. And so, again, coming back to the idea that appearances are deceiving. Macbeth does have some doubts, though. But the reason he eventually convinces to stick to the murder of King Duncan is because Lady Macbeth like calls him out on it, right? She's like, you know, if you were a man, you would do this. You promised me you would do it. So get this murder done. Leave the rest up to me. I'll do the plotting. I'll get the servants and King Duncan so drunk that they're going to pass out, and then we can essentially kill King Duncan and then plant the daggers in the hands of his guards to make it look like they murdered him. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is your Act 1 breakdown. I really do like this timeline, so it'll be posted on Classroom to help you, and I will post more for the rest of the acts. Beautiful. Let me know if you have questions about the plot.